The hardest people to leave are the ones who convince you they're the only safe place left in the world. The rain hammered against the bus window so hard it sounded like handfuls of gravel thrown from the darkness. I sat near the back with a single suitcase at my feet and a one-way ticket clutched between trembling fingers. New York was disappearing behind me mile by mile, its skyline fading into a blur of gray clouds and distant lights. For the first time in almost 2 years, I was completely alone. Or at least I was trying to be. My name is Olivia Carter, and 3 hours earlier, I had walked away from the most powerful man I had ever known. Damien Moretti. Most people in Manhattan knew his name. Some spoke it with admiration, others with fear. I had once spoken it with love. The bus rolled through sheets of rain as headlights streaked across the glass like ghosts. Around me, passengers slept with jackets pulled over their faces, unaware that my entire life was packed into a worn blue suitcase and a canvas shoulder bag. I reached inside the bag and touched the envelope I had left behind. A single letter. A few simple words. Please don't look for me. The memory tightened my chest. I could still see it resting on the kitchen island beneath the warm lights of Damien's penthouse. The city stretched beyond those windows for miles, glittering beneath the night sky. Everything had looked perfect. Everything except me. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the cold glass. The engine hummed beneath the floor as we crossed into Pennsylvania. According to the sign we had passed 15 minutes earlier, I was already more than 100 miles from Manhattan. More than 100 miles from Damien. More than 100 miles from the life that had slowly stopped feeling like my own. A small laugh escaped me. It sounded nervous and unfamiliar. Because if there was one thing everyone knew about Damien Moretti, it was that distance meant nothing to him. He could find a business partner hiding in another state. He could locate a missing shipment in less than an hour. He could uncover secrets people had buried for decades. And yet I had convinced myself I could. Disappear with a bus ticket and a suitcase. The thought should have scared me. Instead, it made my eyes sting with tears. Because I didn't hate him. That was the problem. Leaving would have been easier if I did. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating rows of dark trees rushing past. My phone sat powered off inside my purse. No messages. No calls. No tracking. No connection to the world I had abandoned. I told myself that was what freedom felt like. Then I glanced through the rain-streaked window and saw a pair of headlights far behind us. A black SUV moving steadily through the storm. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just another traveler on a lonely highway. But as the miles passed, the vehicle never disappeared. It stayed there, patient and silent, following the same road through the rain. And for the first time since leaving New York, a terrible thought entered my mind. What if Damien had already read the letter? The silence inside Damien's penthouse felt wrong. Not quiet. Wrong. Like a piano with a missing key that nobody else could hear. He stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the envelope resting beneath the soft pendant lights. Outside, Manhattan glittered beneath the storm, but for the first time in years, the city had lost its ability to hold his attention. The letter was already open. The paper slightly wrinkled where his fingers had gripped it too tightly. Please do not look for me. 6 words. That was all she had left behind. 6 words after 2 years. 6 words after becoming the one person who had managed to walk past his walls and stay there. Damien lowered himself into a chair and read the note again. Then again. Then a 4th time. As if the meaning might change. As if some hidden explanation would suddenly appear between the lines. It never did. The grandfather clock in the living room ticked steadily. Midnight. Then 12:15. Then 12:30. His phone vibrated twice on the counter. He ignored it. Another message arrived. Then another. Business. Meetings. Problems worth millions of dollars. None of them mattered. Olivia was gone. He rubbed a hand across his jaw and looked toward the hallway leading to her room. Her room. Even now he thought of it that way. The door remained slightly open. A lamp still glowed inside. Earlier that morning she had been there drinking coffee beside the window, wearing one of his oversized sweaters and reading a novel she claimed she would finish someday. Everything had seemed normal. That realization bothered him most. There had been no argument. No warning. No goodbye. Just absence. Slowly, Damien stood and walked into the room. Her scent lingered faintly in the air. A framed photograph remained on the bookshelf. A dried flower rested between the pages of an unfinished book. Small pieces of a life she had left behind. He noticed something then. The drawer of her nightstand was slightly open. Inside sat a folded piece of paper. His pulse slowed. Olivia always wrote things down. Grocery lists, reminders, thoughts she never said aloud. He unfolded the page carefully. His expression hardened as he read. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. Names, dates, phone numbers, scattered notes written over several weeks. None of it made complete sense at first. Then one sentence caught his attention. Someone has been watching the clinic again. Damien read it twice. A cold feeling settled into his chest. Olivia worked at a pediatric clinic 3 days a week. She loved that place. She never complained about the long hours. Never mentioned being uncomfortable there. Yet she had written those words. He turned the page over. More notes. More observations. Vehicles parked nearby. Unfamiliar faces. Strange calls that disconnected after a single ring. Damien stared at the paper for a long moment. Suddenly the letter felt different. This was not someone leaving because she wanted freedom. This was someone running from something. His phone buzzed again. This time he picked it up. A single call connected immediately. "Find Olivia," he said quietly. The voice on the other end paused. "Do you think she is in danger?" Damien looked toward the rain sliding down the glass windows and remembered the fear hidden behind her smile during the past few weeks. "I think she left to protect someone," he answered. "And I am afraid that someone was me." By sunrise the storm had weakened, but the knot in my stomach had only grown tighter. I had not slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those headlights lingering behind the bus, steady and patient beneath the rain. When the driver announced a 15-minute stop at a service plaza outside Columbus, Ohio, I followed the other passengers into the bright fluorescent glow of the building and tried to convince myself I was imagining things. The smell of coffee and fresh pastries filled the air. Families stretched their legs. Truck drivers stood near the windows staring at the gray morning sky. Everything looked normal. That was the problem. Fear rarely arrived looking dangerous. It arrived disguised as ordinary moments. I bought a coffee and sat alone near the back corner. My hands wrapped around the warm paper cup while I watched the parking lot through the glass. The black SUV was there, parked 3 rows away. My heart stumbled. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe hundreds of black SUVs crossed American highways every day. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out wearing a dark jacket and baseball cap. He never looked toward the building, never approached the entrance. He simply stood beside the vehicle speaking quietly into a phone. Watching, waiting. I turned away immediately. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Damien had found me. The certainty settled over me with terrifying ease. I wanted to be angry. Instead, I felt something far more complicated. Relief. Because if Damien knew where I was, it meant he was alive. It meant the threats had not reached him. It meant leaving had worked. At least for now. I took a long breath and pulled a folded photograph from my wallet. It had been taken the previous summer near the harbor. Damien stood beside me wearing sunglasses, pretending to hate having his picture taken. I was laughing at something he had said. Looking at it now felt like opening an old wound. People saw power when they looked at Damien Moretti. Wealth, influence, confidence. They never saw the man who remembered my favorite coffee order. The man who secretly donated money to children's hospitals and demanded anonymity. The man who sat awake beside my bed when I caught pneumonia last winter. Those memories made leaving harder than any threat ever could. My phone remained switched off, but curiosity eventually defeated discipline. I powered it on for less than 30 seconds. Notifications exploded across the screen. Missed calls from friends. Emails. Messages. Then one new voicemail from an unknown number. My chest tightened. I knew before listening. The recording lasted only 7 seconds. There was silence at first. Then Damien's voice. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous only because of how carefully he was holding himself together. "Olivia," he said softly. "I know you had a reason. I just need to understand it." The message ended. No accusation. No demand. No anger. That somehow hurt more. I switched the phone off again and closed my eyes. Across the parking lot, the black SUV remained motionless beneath the cloudy sky. Whoever sat inside was not there to force me back to New York. They were there to keep me in sight, which meant Damien was not hunting me. He was protecting me. And if he believed I needed protection, then whatever I had been running from was closer than I thought. 3 days later, Seattle greeted me with cold air, low clouds, and the smell of salt drifting in from the water. It was not home, But that was exactly why I chose it. Nobody here knew Olivia Carter. Nobody connected me to Damian Moretti. Nobody looked at me and saw headlines, rumors, or questions. I rented a small apartment above a family-owned bakery in a quiet neighborhood north of downtown. The floors creaked when I walked across them. The kitchen was barely large enough for a table and 2 chairs. The bedroom window overlooked an alley lined with brick buildings and overflowing flower boxes. It was imperfect. It was ordinary. It was everything I thought I wanted. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. I found work at a pediatric clinic that needed extra help. The pay was not impressive, but the children made me smile in ways I had forgotten were possible. Every morning, I walked 6 blocks to work carrying a travel mug of coffee and pretending my life had always looked this way. Slowly, I began breathing easier. Slowly, the constant tension in my shoulders started to disappear. I stopped checking every parked vehicle, stopped expecting unknown numbers to appear on my phone, stopped waking up in the middle of the night convinced someone was standing outside my door. For the first time since leaving New York, I allowed myself to believe I might actually stay hidden. Then one Thursday afternoon, everything changed. Rain tapped softly against the clinic windows while I organized patient files near the reception desk. The waiting room was empty. The last appointment had ended 20 minutes earlier. My coworker Jenna was locking up for the evening when I happened to glance through the front window. A black SUV sat across the street. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like missing a step on a staircase. The vehicle remained parked beside the curb. Dark windows. Familiar shape. Familiar presence. I told myself not to panic. Seattle had thousands of SUVs. Thousands. Yet when I looked again 10 minutes later, it was still there. Motionless. Watching. Jenna followed my gaze. "Friend of yours?" she asked casually. "What?" "That vehicle. It has been parked there most of the afternoon." The blood drained from my face. "Probably waiting for someone," I replied. My voice sounded distant, even to me. After she left, I remained inside another 15 minutes pretending to finish paperwork. Eventually, I forced myself outside. The air felt damp and cool against my skin. The street was quiet. Traffic rolled steadily past. The SUV remained exactly where I had seen it. Then, as soon as I stepped onto the sidewalk, it pulled away from the curb and disappeared into traffic. Not fast, not suspicious, just gone. My heart continued racing long after it vanished. That night, I sat beside my apartment window staring at the city lights and trying to convince myself it meant nothing. But deep down, I knew better. Damian's people had found me weeks ago. I already suspected that. The real question was why they were still here. I picked up my phone and stared at the dark screen. Part of me wanted to call him. Part of me wanted to hear his voice again. Then I remembered the reason I left. The notes. The warnings. The feeling that someone had been getting closer. Just before midnight, a folded piece of paper slid beneath my apartment door. I froze. Slowly, I crossed the room and picked it up. There were only 4 words written across the page. "You are not safe." I did not sleep that night. The note sat on the kitchen table beneath the yellow glow of a single lamp while rain tapped softly against the window. 4 words. "You are not safe." No signature. No explanation. Just a warning that somehow felt more frightening than any threat could have been. I checked the hallway twice before dawn. Nobody. No sounds. No clues. By morning, exhaustion hung over me like a heavy blanket. The city outside moved normally. People carried umbrellas. Delivery trucks unloaded supplies. The bakery downstairs opened at 6 and filled the building with the smell of fresh bread and cinnamon. Everything looked ordinary. I wanted desperately to believe the note was some kind of mistake, a prank, a misunderstanding. But deep down I knew better. Someone had gone through the trouble of finding me. Someone knew exactly where I lived. At the clinic, I struggled to focus. Every time the front door opened, my attention snapped toward it. Every unfamiliar face made my pulse quicken. Around noon, Jenna noticed. "You look terrible," she said while organizing appointment cards. "Are you getting sick?" I forced a smile. "Just tired." She nodded, but did not seem convinced. The afternoon passed slowly. A little girl gave me a drawing of a rainbow. An elderly grandfather thanked me for helping his grandson through a difficult appointment. Normal moments. Good moments. The kind of moments that reminded me why I love this work. Then, just before closing, I looked through the front window and froze. The black SUV was back, parked in the same spot across the street. Waiting. Watching. My chest tightened. This time I was not going to ignore it. The moment my shift ended, I crossed the street. Rain misted the air as traffic rolled past. The closer I got, the faster my heart beat. The driver's window lowered before I reached the vehicle. A man in his 40s sat behind the wheel. Short brown hair, calm expression, professional eyes. He looked more like an accountant than a bodyguard. "Miss Carter," he said. Not a question. My stomach dropped. "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone making sure you get home safely." I almost laughed. "I never asked for that." "No," he replied quietly. "But someone else did." "Of course. Damien." I looked away toward the gray Seattle skyline. Anger mixed with relief in a way that made no sense. "How long have you been following me?" The man hesitated. "Since Ohio." I stared at him. Ohio. The bus. The highway. The service plaza. They had been there the entire time. "Then the note last night came from you." His expression changed immediately. "What note?" Every nerve in my body went still. The warning under my door. For the first time, genuine concern appeared in his eyes. "Miss Carter, we did not leave any note." The traffic noise seemed to disappear. The city blurred around the edges. Because if Damien's people had not left the message, then someone else had. Someone who knew where I lived. Someone who knew I was hiding. And someone who wanted me to know they had found me. The next 48 hours felt like walking through a fog that refused to lift. Every sound seemed louder. Every stranger seemed suspicious. Yet life continued with frustrating normality. Children arrived at the clinic carrying backpacks decorated with cartoon characters. Parents worried about homework and soccer practice. The world kept moving while my own felt frozen between two impossible choices. Run again or finally face what I had been running from. On Saturday morning, Seattle woke beneath a blanket of low gray clouds. I left my apartment early, hoping a long walk would quiet my thoughts. The waterfront was nearly empty. Seagulls drifted above the harbor, while ferries crossed the bay through ribbons of mist. For a few minutes, I almost felt peaceful. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I stopped walking. My pulse immediately accelerated. For 3 rings, I stared at the screen. On the 4th, I answered. "Hello." Silence. Then a voice I had not heard in nearly a month. "Olivia." The sound of Damien's voice hit me harder than I expected. Deep. Controlled. Familiar. I closed my eyes. Suddenly I was back in New York, hearing him say my name across crowded rooms and quiet mornings. "You should not have called," I whispered. "You should not have left." Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Wind swept across the water. Somewhere nearby, a ferry horn echoed through the fog. "Your people found me," I finally said. "Because you disappeared without telling me why." I looked down at the harbor below. "I was trying to protect you." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything he had said. "Protect me from what?" he asked quietly. I leaned against the railing and stared at the gray waves. For weeks I had rehearsed this conversation in my head. Now that it was happening, the words refused to come. "Olivia." His voice softened. "Talk to me." My throat tightened. Someone was watching me in New York. "I know." The answer shocked me. I straightened immediately. "What?" "I know," he repeated. "I found evidence after you left." The cold wind suddenly felt much colder. "Then why did you not tell me?" "Because I did not know who it was." His honesty caught me off guard. Damien rarely admitted uncertainty. "And now?" I asked. Now I know enough to be worried. Fear settled heavily in my chest. Not because of his words. Because of the concern behind them. Damien was not a man easily frightened. "The note was not from us," he continued. "I know. Which means whoever was watching you found you before I could reach you." A chill ran through me. The harbor no longer felt peaceful. Every passerby suddenly seemed too close. Every parked vehicle seemed suspicious. "Where are you?" Damien asked. I hesitated. "Seattle." A quiet laugh escaped him. Not amusement. Relief. "Good. Good. Because I am there too." My breath caught. I turned slowly toward the crowded street behind me. People moved along the sidewalk, carrying coffee cups and umbrellas. Cars rolled past beneath the cloudy sky. Then I saw him. Across the street. Standing beside a black SUV. Watching me. And for the first time since leaving New York, I realized Damien had not come to take me home. He had come because whatever was following me had finally gotten close enough for him to stop waiting. For a moment, neither of us moved. The city seemed to fade into the background until there was only Damien standing across the street beneath a gray Seattle sky. He looked exactly as I remembered, and completely different at the same time. The sharp suit was gone, replaced by a dark coat and a simple charcoal sweater. His hair moved slightly in the wind coming off the water, but his eyes had not changed. Those impossible blue eyes found mine immediately, holding me in place more effectively than any words ever could. I should have walked away. I should have crossed the street in the opposite direction and disappeared into the crowd. Instead, I stood there gripping my phone while months of distance collapsed in a single heartbeat. Damien ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. Then he crossed the street. Not quickly, not aggressively, just steadily. Like a man approaching something valuable he was afraid of frightening away. When he finally stopped a few feet from me, neither of us spoke. The silence felt strangely familiar. We had shared plenty of silences before, comfortable ones. This was not one of them. This one carried unanswered questions and weeks of regret. His gaze moved over my face as if confirming I was real. "You lost weight," he said quietly. I almost laughed. Of all the things he could have said, "Hello to you too." Something softened in his expression. "Hello, Olivia." Hearing my name in his voice again made my chest ache. I looked away first. "You should not have come. You know that is not true." The certainty in his answer irritated me because part of me agreed. Wind swept across the harbor. A ferry passed in the distance. Around us, strangers continued their lives without realizing how much history stood between two people on a sidewalk. "I left for a reason," I said. "I know. Then why are you here?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Because your reason no longer matters if it gets you hurt." I folded my arms. "I was protecting you. And I was trying to protect you." The frustration in his voice surprised me. Damien rarely showed emotion so openly. "Do you have any idea what it was like finding that letter?" he asked. "Do you know how many possibilities I imagined?" Guilt settled heavily inside me. Because I did know. I had thought about it every day since leaving. "I did not want you involved." He shook his head slowly. "That was never your decision to make." We stood there staring at each other. Two stubborn people who had spent weeks making choices for one another without asking permission. Finally, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the folded warning note. Damien took it carefully. His eyes scanned the message. The change in his expression was immediate. Not fear. Recognition. "What is it?" I asked. He looked up. "The paper. What about it?" "I have seen this before." A chill ran through me. Damien folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. His attention shifted briefly toward the street behind me. The warmth vanished from his face, replaced by the focused look I remembered from difficult moments back in New York. "We need to leave." My stomach tightened. "Why?" His gaze remained fixed on something over my shoulder. "Because whoever left this note is watching us right now." My heart immediately began to race. Every instinct told me to turn around and search the crowd, but Damien lightly touched my elbow. The gesture was small, almost invisible, yet it stopped me. "Do not look," he said quietly. "If someone is watching, let them think we have not noticed." The seriousness in his voice sent a chill through me. Together we began walking toward the waiting SUV. The waterfront suddenly felt different. The tourists taking photographs. The joggers moving along the path. The people sitting outside coffee shops. Any one of them could have been the person who left the note. Any one of them could have known exactly who I was. We reached the vehicle, and Damien opened the door for me. I hesitated. A month ago, I would have climbed inside without a second thought. Now everything felt complicated. "Olivia." His voice softened. "Please." The single word carried more emotion than an entire speech. I nodded and got in. The city slid past outside the window as we drove north through Seattle. Rain began falling again, streaking the glass with silver lines. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence was uncomfortable at first, then strangely familiar. Finally, Damien broke it. "There is something I need to tell you." I turned toward him. His attention remained fixed on the road ahead. The note was not random. "What do you mean?" He reached into his coat and removed the folded paper. 3 years ago, someone inside my organization used this exact paper stock for private messages. My stomach tightened. "Someone inside?" He nodded once. "Someone I trusted." I stared at him. "You think this person found me?" "I think this person wanted me to find you." The realization settled heavily between us. Whoever had been watching me was not trying to stay hidden. They wanted Damien involved. They wanted him to know. Outside, traffic slowed near an intersection. Red brake lights reflected across the wet pavement. "Why?" I asked. Why would anyone do that? Damien exhaled slowly. For the first time since seeing him again, he looked tired. Not physically tired. Emotionally tired. Like a man carrying a burden for too long. Because of a mistake I made years ago. I had known Damien long enough to understand the significance of that sentence. He rarely spoke about regret. What kind of mistake? His jaw tightened. The kind that comes back when you think it is gone forever. The answer only created more questions. Before I could ask another one, his phone rang. The man driving glanced into the mirror. Damien answered immediately. He listened for several seconds without speaking. Then his entire expression changed. The color drained slightly from his face. Are you certain? He asked. Silence. Understood. The call ended. The vehicle suddenly felt much smaller. What happened? I asked. Damien looked at me. Really looked at me. The way he had the day we first met. The way people look at something precious they are afraid of losing. The apartment above the bakery, he said quietly. Someone broke in less than 10 minutes after we left. My breath caught. Rain continued falling outside as the SUV moved through the city. And for the first time, I realized leaving New York had never actually ended the danger. It had simply led it straight to me. The realization followed me long. After the words left Damien's mouth, someone had entered my apartment within minutes of my departure. Not to find me. Not to steal anything. To send a message. Rain continued to fall as the SUV carried us through Seattle's evening traffic. But for the first time since I had fled New York, something inside me shifted. I was tired of running. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of making decisions based on fear. We arrived at a small waterfront house just after sunset. It was nothing like Damien's penthouse. No towering glass walls. No skyline views. Just a quiet home overlooking the water. The kind of place most people would drive past without noticing. Inside, the rooms were warm and simple. A fire crackled softly in the stone fireplace. The scent of coffee lingered in the air. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. I stood near the window watching the rain while Damien reviewed information sent to his phone. Eventually, he set the device aside and walked toward me. I know who left the note, he said. I turned slowly. You do? He nodded. Someone who worked for my organization years ago. Someone I trusted. His voice carried disappointment more than anger. After I ended several business operations, he believed I had betrayed everything we built. I stared at him. This was about you all along. No. He looked directly into my eyes. It became about you because you mattered to me. The room fell silent. Outside, waves rolled gently against the shoreline. I felt tears threaten the corners of my eyes. Not because I was afraid anymore. Because for weeks I had carried the weight of believing I had protected him by leaving. And now I understood the truth. I had only hurt both of us. I thought I was saving you. I whispered. Damien stepped closer. Olivia, you do not have to save me from every storm. I laughed softly through the tears. That is easy for you to say. A faint smile appeared. The first genuine smile I had seen since Seattle. Probably. We stood there for a long moment. No dramatic declarations. No grand gestures. Just honesty. The thing we should have given each other from the beginning. The following morning brought answers. Damien's team confirmed that the person behind the notes had already left the city after realizing his efforts had failed. The warnings had been designed to frighten me and draw Damien into a confrontation that never happened. Once he realized we were together again, he disappeared. Just like that. Weeks of fear ended not with chaos, but with absence. Sometimes the shadow becomes powerless once you stop running from it. 3 months later, I sat on the porch of the waterfront house wrapped in a blanket with a cup of coffee warming my hands. The Seattle sky was clear for once. Seagulls drifted above the bay. Inside, Damien was attempting to cook breakfast and failing spectacularly. I could hear cabinet doors opening and closing followed by a muttered complaint. I smiled to myself. The future was still uncertain. Life always would be. But I had finally learned something important. The strongest people are not the ones who face every problem alone. Sometimes strength means letting someone stand beside you. And after crossing an entire country trying to escape, I finally understood that home was never a place. It was the person who kept finding me when I was lost.